right, since we are missing some students today, again, I will go ahead and I'll record lectures once again and post those. Have you guys been able to access those and be able to see them or no?
I haven't tried.
Haven't tried? Were you able to?
Really big files.
They're really big files,
Yeah,
okay.
I wasn't able to download it when I was gone.
Okay, so that's not working very well then, okay. So I don't know entirely then,
You can upload it
another
to
way to go
YouTube.
about it.
Upload it to YouTube. Yeah, that's what like a lot of teachers do.
Okay, you might have to, somebody might have to come in and help me with that because I don't want it to be like a public like, hey, look at Johnson, you know, but if somebody would be willing to maybe help with that, I would be willing to do that. I just don't want,
You can make them fun.
yeah, I just don't want it to be like a, hey, look at my crazy AP US history teacher.
You wouldn't do that. No, you can lock your channel so that people will link to you. That might also do.
Okay.
And you can make a Google Class and you can post the links on
Okay,
Google Class.
well, I don't even know how to do any of that, so I'm gonna need your help with that, okay? All right, yes, ma'am.
There's like a setting where people only with the link can see the video.
Okay, either way, I don't know how to do any YouTube posting, anything, so
Teach the teacher.
you guys are gonna have to teach the teacher in this instance, yes, see? This is where sometimes technology outpaces us as teachers.
That's good.
It will happen to you too, yes. And then you'll feel,
This isn't over.
no,
The
no.
one with
The
like the
transparency.
Yeah, and you wrote on it, yeah. Okay, alright, we left off yesterday though, talking about how the movies and radio were not only reflective of culture, but were also helping to shape American culture in the 1920s. Would you argue that the media or TV today, movies today, are reflective of our culture, or do they create our culture? Which do you think? Create? Why create? Why are you saying create? Give me a specific reason for that. Okay, so the movie quotes, alright. Favorite.
Well, I mean, most movies don't reflect our culture because not everyone is going out and shooting people all the time and having crazy car rides as portrayed in movies, but because you watch those movies are like, oh, I want to buy a really fancy car, or oh, I want to live in a super big house and live a life like that.
Okay, so it's shaping like a more affluent society or a want for an affluent society. Okay. Any other arguments?
People look at like the famous people or they follow whatever
Yeah. So they are creating our culture, not reflecting our culture. Okay. I would personally, I would probably argue with you as well. If you look at over time with the television and movie industry, at one point in time it was not acceptable to show a husband and wife in the same bed as each other. And in fact, like in shows such as like I Love Lucy, or even a little bit later with the Brady Bunch, you would see them go upstairs, but they would never show the marital bedroom. And if they did, they would show two separate beds. Okay? But now we see much more. But even like when I was your guys' age and a little bit younger, there was, for example, Ellen DeGeneres had a sitcom show, and her character on that sitcom came out as being gay, and her show was subsequently canceled. MTV, The Real World, I don't even know if that's still on at this point in time, but what first came out during, when I was like, I think the first episode was like in 99 or something, so yes. I was in high school then, and I know that's like eons ago for you guys. But there was always at least one, there was one person on that show that was openly gay, and as a result of that we began to see more and more people on television that were homosexual, and I would argue that as a society we became more accepting of that because it was something that was seen in our culture. Does that make sense? And so I would argue with you that yes, it does shape that. So here, in this particular instance, it will have a dramatic impact on the 1920s culture because of the fact that this film, D.W. Griffith's A Birth of a Nation, will glorify the Klan and lead to a sharp increase in Klan membership in the 1920s. Yes, Julia?
I remember this thing that we read, or that we saw in AP Euro, that was a Calvin Hobbes comic, and it was just like, they were reading about Marx, and it was just like, why do you think he called religion the opiate of the masses? And then they walked away, there was a TV, it was like, because Marx hadn't seen nothing yet.
Yeah.
So it's just like, it's like, it's the opiate of the masses, and like it influences them a lot.
Yeah. Very, very true. I like that
I love
connection.
Calvin Hobbes.
Yeah. Calvin and Hobbes is a good comic.
Beautiful.
All right, so remember, it is a silent film, okay? But there is some music to it.
I thought it was
Thank you. No.
So this is a white man in blackface, okay? And I don't know if you caught it, but basically he's arguing that, hey, I am a captain in the military, so therefore I should be equal to a white man, so therefore I should be able to go after this white woman and marry her. And she's like, oh no, I can't be married by a black man. He's evil and he's gonna hurt me. And he's gonna beat me up or rape me or something. I must hide. And I'm a poor, poor lady who can't defend herself. Now in the story, the white man that you see here, he is actually a family friend, and he is a suitor for her. So he was going out to try to meet her, to talk with her, and in part of this dating process. She had red bucket. She was supposed to meet me here. That's Mary Pickford, America's sweetheart. Yes, and it depends on the particular size of the theater. Some theaters had orchestras playing in the theater itself, live, yes. And then in other cases you would have, it would be like almost like a radio station that they would tune into at the same time that the film was playing. Does that make sense? So, or a recording of that. But yes, it wasn't all encompassed on the film and with the sound on it as well. Go away, I'll jump, I'll jump. You're so scary.
It's a dummy. It's just really obvious when her arms.
Oh no! She would not have lived.
No, she wouldn't have, but just wait.
Is he gonna jump too? It doesn't even seem that high when you think about it. Like the camera and what is there?
Is that?
What? Oh.
I must
cut him off the
Hey, get back here. I see you.
He jumps too.
Everybody's
Where
in
is
full
she?
suit.
She jumps into
Oh
her arms.
no!
Into her arms. No.
Oh, she's still moving. What?
Oh, she's dead.
Yeah, right. She would be totally dead.
Okay, how about a safe way now? Everybody's. Because there was a safe way.
Well, why did you do that?
The black man wasn't. Why did so dramatic?
And if she wasn't dead
Can't really.
yet,
Because
she's dead now. She has a spinal cord injury.
And even though
As I
she
flop her around.
Oh, she pushed her own arms off the ground.
And she's
Wait,
got
is there
blood
blood?
coming out of her
Dramatic.
mouth.
Oh
Interesting.
gosh.
She's actually dead?
Yeah.
Okay.
Women.
That part.
Okay.
You understand.
In 1927, then our first talkie comes out. Once again, it's a man in blackface, Al Johnson, playing in the Jazz Singer.
Hold on.
I whistle. Now give it them hard and heavy. Go right ahead. Good, 20. Goodbye. Good, 20. Don't cry.
So is he?
Well, it's just a break.
He's in blackface, yeah. Yeah,
Away from you.
What?
Don't step outside and make
yes.
Just be pretty and fair.
Yeah, it's not as dark as the previous one.
I guess.
though.
I was a man. I never fail. If you don't get a nail again, oh, I'm in jail. Hey, hey. Don't cry, Turkey, don't cry. Here's me twisting, goodbye.
Louis Primo was
Okay.
alive during this time. I'm sorry, I just wanted to say that.
It was an advertisement, but I found it out, I'll just go with that. Okay. But like I said, the movie will absolutely eclipse all other forms of entertainment. They produce 10 times more, or make an American spend 10 times more on going to the movies than they do on our second most popular entertainment, sports. Okay, but sports will also become a huge draw for the American public to go and watch and witness. So we wind up seeing the development of the celebrities, not just from the movies, but also from our sports stars such as Babe Ruth and Ty Cobb, Jack Dempsey, and of course we talked about Lindbergh yesterday. It's not just in the movies or in sports though that we will see this reflection of culture. We also see it in other areas as well. Not only in music, but in literature, as well as in the way that women dance. After World War I, jazz will become the popular form of music. Okay, it's largely influenced by African American spirituals and has a very rhythmic element to it. We see the works of individuals like Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington, and begin to spread what was beginning to know, or early on was known as Dixieland jazz. Louis Armstrong will take that Dixieland jazz and actually shape it into what we more commonly know as a jazz, which we heard in the Jazz Singer there. Now, jazz itself actually starts in the South, predominantly in Louisiana. However, largely because of the Great Migration during World War I, we will see that jazz be brought north into areas like Chicago and New York and the Cotton Club in New York. Okay? This then becomes, of course, known as the, it starts with an H. Harlem Renaissance. Very good. Okay. In the 1930s, New Orleans will become kind of the center of the swing era, and we'll see it develop out of there. But it is a much faster tempo than music that they had been accustomed to. Yes, ma'am.
So the Harlem Renaissance is just them bringing.
Yeah, and it's kind of a rebirth of the neighborhood of Harlem, okay? Largely spurred on by music. Does that make sense? Okay. The tempo is much faster. It's on a 2/4 meter, so if you understand music, that kind of makes sense to you. But yeah, it's much faster than what they're used to. In literature, we see the works of what has become known as the lost generation of writers. After World War I, these writers were kind of outside of the dominant Protestant, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant norm, largely because of the fact that they often portrayed a lot of resentment with not only the 1920s culture, but also the idealism. They often felt betrayed by society and believed that their generation was betrayed by Woodrow Wilson and the other leaders that brought them into war in World War I. If we look at some of the authors of this, we have Ernest Hemingway, who writes The Old Man and the Sea. Has anybody read the book?
No.
I don't want to ruin the book for you. It's the most defeatist book ever. Okay, so he goes out in The Old Man and the Sea. The old man, he's a fisherman, and he's been trying for a very, very long time to catch a fish, and not being successful at it. And he's basically at the brink of poverty and starvation. Well, he finally catches a fish, and it's so big that he can't get the fish into the boat. So he has to drag the fish behind him back into shore. And as he drags the fish behind him, different things come up and eat at it and eat away at it. Different things happen to the fish. So by the time that he gets to the shore, all he has is the skeleton of the fish. And the book is over.
Wow.
What? Why didn't you pull it on board when it was like half?
So it's very typical of Ernest Hemingway, right? There's not a happy ending. And it's also very typical of the lost generation of writers, where there really is not a happy ending in the book, a positive conclusion. It just sort of ends. Okay? F. Scott Fitzgerald will publish his first work at the age of 24 called This Side of Paradise. Kind of becomes a Bible for young people. And so we see that he argues that all good deeds, all wars fought, all faiths in man are shaken. And then of course, you guys are most familiar with F. Scott Fitzgerald because of the work The Great Gatsby, which we force you to read at the high school level.
We're gonna watch the movie next week.
Okay. Yeah, it should be. I mean, it's good. It's good.
Yeah, they're watching
The new one or the old?
Oh,
version?
I love DiCaprio.
Wait, you guys are watching the new one.
I want to see Leo. So do I.
But it's written in 1925. Let's focus back in here. Theodore Dreiser is another author during this time frame. He wrote a book called The American Tragedy, which was about the murder of a pregnant worker girl, and by her socially kind of ambiguous young lover, and nobody really knows if the lover is like male, female. So, but Ernest Hemingway had actually fought in World War I as well, and so he comes out of that very like disillusioned. So we see from him and from that style, he writes also, other than Old Man and the Sea, he writes Farewell to Arms. In 1929, The Sun Also Rises in 1926, amongst others. Sinclair Lewis is also one of the writers of the Lost Generation. He's actually a Minnesota native, and wrote Main Street in 1920 and Babbitt in 1922. Sorry. Okay. We also have Faulkner in there as well, and Faulkner is probably best known for The Sound and the Fury, or As I Lay Dying. Okay. So poetry during the time was typified by T.S. Eliot, and Robert Frost. What?
This is how the world ends.
Yeah.
Not with a bang.
Yeah, not with a bang, but with a murmur. Yes. The term "the Lost Generation" is actually coined by another writer, Gertrude Stein. So we see that kind of the idea within there. When it comes to women in the 1920s, there almost gets to be this clash of culture. most Americans wanted to kind of preserve this traditional values and traditional ideas, but the reality of it is that more and more American women are wanting a greater amount of freedom, and things are beginning to change socially as well. There begins kind of this sexual revolution. Now, this is largely spurred on by the theories of Dr. Sigmund Freud, who mistakenly
Oh, love that guy.
basically said he's largely misinterpreted by a lot of Americans, but a lot of his ideas, and basically what he argued was that sexual repression is basically the fault of all of society's ills. So when men go out and commit crime, it's because they're sexually repressed. When women go out and behave in a morally repugnant way, drinking, smoking, the like, it's because they are sexually repressed. And that it's also responsible for the vast majority of an individual's emotional and psychological problems. He argues that sex, it doesn't need to be just for pleasure purposes, which at the time in our Victorian pre-World War I ideals, sex was used solely for the purpose of procreation. So post-World War I, he argues that no, not only should you endeavor in it for pleasure, but also that your health demanded it, that you not only were sexually gratified and liberated through this, okay? Now, I am not arguing for you teens to go and do something you shouldn't be doing, okay? But this is what Freud says, okay? But he argues that the youth of America needed to go out and experience something more, and that marriages should be based off of the ideas of love and romance and pleasure, as well as friendship, rather than just marriage for convenience or a marriage for business venture, okay, so for place. But we do see, as a result of this, as well as, so the change in marriage, a delay in marriage, the ideas of Freud, the ability of American women to have additional time because they're not spending so much time within the home cooking and cleaning because of modern appliances, or more modern appliances, not modern like what our sense, but modern at that time, as well as the automobile, allows for a greater sense of freedom. In addition to that, you have to keep in mind that in 1920, American women get the right to vote. Okay? So on top of all of these things, and on top of the fact that women during World War I had seen increased social gains as they went out into the workforce and had the ability to be very independent through the course of World War I, they don't want to see those social gains lost as a result of the war ending. And so women begin to kind of have this little bit of a revolt against the establishment. Now, within that revolt of the establishment, women begin to see kind of this greater idea for independence, the greater use of birth control, although illegal through the Comstock laws. Okay, we are seeing women take a greater control of their own personal bodies. And not only does this appear within the greater use of birth control, but it also winds up then having a physical manifestation or visual manifestation within women as well. No longer were women wearing the long Victorian style dress, which went down to the ankles or just above the ankle, and went all the way down to the wrist. Women now begin to wear and don a style of clothing that will be much more revealing than anything a woman, a proper woman, would have ever worn before. Not only their ankles, but their knees too. It's scandalous, okay? But women cut their hair short short in a bob style. They drank and smoked in public. Now that doesn't mean women didn't drink and smoke before, but they didn't drink or smoke in public because it was considered unscrupulous and immoral. Women who drank and smoked in public prior to the 1920s were prostitutes, okay? So a regular Victorian woman would have never allowed herself to be seen like that in public because people would have thought of her as a prostitute, okay? They begin to wear flesh-colored stockings, so even though they are wearing a stocking, okay, it still looks as though it's their bare leg. Scandal, scandal, okay? And women often wore either short sleeves or sleeveless dresses, which came to, generally speaking, just right above the knee or right below the knee. These women were often called flappers, okay? But that style then expressed the new freedom that women had available to them. We even start to begin to see women wearing more of your traditional one-piece bathing suits. Prior to this time, a woman's bathing suit actually had contained a very long skirt with it as well.
You're gonna sink.
Like, what was it?
Yeah, it was, and they used to be made out of wool.
That's not, you can't swim in that.
That's a good
Not
way
very
to
well.
drown.
It is a great way to drown. Yes, it is. Okay.
Oh,
But what we do see is we see the skirts removed, and so women begin to wear a more traditional, or what we see as a more traditional one-style or one-piece bathing suit. They were still longer, though. It wasn't like you were wearing like super high-cut suits or anything. It was more of like a boy short kind of style, full one-piece. Okay, so it was, but still, and it completely covered the bum and things like that too. So okay, but we do see more women wearing makeup and having all of this greater sense of independence. As they become more independent, they do start to organize even more, and we will see in 1923, Alice Paul will write the Equal Rights Amendment, pushing and advocating for women to have a greater sense of equality as well. It is defeated in 1980s, 83, I think is when it's actually defeated, 83, 84, something like that. Okay, but the ERA, had it been passed, would have made it so that women had to be paid equitably for the same amount of work as men. It also would have prevented discrimination against women in the legal system, as well as in divorce and in other arenas. But it is actually argued against by some women as well, because had the Equal Rights Amendment would have been passed, it would have also probably gotten rid of the ideas of child support. And so there are women who argue directly against it because of it would have removed alimony payments and child support upon a divorce. As well as it would have changed women's ability. There are certain things as a woman that you don't have to do simply because you're a woman, like register for the draft. And the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment, in order for women to ever truly be equal to men, they would have to do everything that guys do, which would in turn also mean that at 18, women in the United States would have to register for the draft. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
So that just means if they end up needing a draft, they will be drafted in, but not like automatically you are in the army.
Yeah. So the guys at 18, when they turn 18, they have to register for the selective service, which is to registering for the draft. Okay?
So we don't have to.
All 3 guys.
Yes. Yeah.
So like everyone, even like, what if someone had like a sickness? Would they still have to be drafted?
No. There are exemptions to it. If you are mentally or physically handicapped, you wouldn't be have to register for the draft. But basically,
Then, like, then wouldn't like people be like, oh, I have a really bad, I don't know, so
In
I
order
have
to-
mental.
There's
In order
a
to
dot
get
that
out
not
of the
be
draft,
drafted.
you need a lot of proof that you
Yeah.
Oh,
you
okay.
are
medical
physically
documentation.
impaired or that you have like a strong moral objection.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of hoops to jump through if you want to get out of it. People who are severely physically or mentally handicapped generally already have a lot of that paperwork in place because of the fact that they're already receiving Social Security benefits and other health benefits from the federal government and have been since they were born, if it was something that they were born with. Does that make sense? So a lot of that paperwork is already in place. If it was something that happened like when you were 17, you would have to get that paperwork in place prior to turning 18, okay? So, women, we will see a greater encouragement of women to enter into and go into colleges, but while also at college, we see a greater push for women to join sports and to be involved in sports. So we are beginning to see the formation of women's softball leagues, as well as women's basketball leagues, which also challenges those traditional roles. My grandma actually played in a basketball uniform very similar to this, but my grandma's not in that picture. I
Oh,
just
okay.
a picture of my grandma, okay? Not here, I want to get one, but I don't have one here. What? Yeah, that's what they would play basketball in.
We used to play basketball in jeans.
Dude, that'd be fun.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can see that things obviously are much different today than they were back then, but what you need to understand is there is a cultural shift here to encourage more women to be more or greater participants in things like sports. It's within schools rather than just, hey, go take home ec and things like that, okay? Although those things are still very much encouraged for women to be doing. Professionally, we see women begin to make huge contributions in science, medicine, law, and literature. One of those, Florence Sabin, comes up with tuberculosis treatment, which will revolutionize how things are done. You will see Willa Cather, Edith Wharton, and Edna Ferber all be authors during this time frame. And we'll see the push for that as well. Okay. In addition to that, we will see Margaret Sanger, who will form the American Birth Control League in 1921, promoting better health for women through the use of birth control. Eventually, the American Birth Control League will become Planned Parenthood. Sanger is put in jail numerous times for dispensing information about birth control, which would have been a violation of the Comstock Law.
Why are the Comstock laws put in place in the first place?
Because they didn't want women getting ideas. Don't want to put those ideas in those women's
Yeah, they were trying to legislate morality, which it's really, really difficult to legislate morality.
Yeah.
But we try in the 1920s, not only when it comes with birth control and the Comstock laws, but we also try with, for example, prohibition is trying to legislate morality. Doesn't really work very well. It is relative to the time, okay? Despite this idea of the flapper and this great change of the American women, the reality of it is that most women remain in kind of that cult of domesticity. Most women remain within the home. And so there is not like, it's not this huge paradoxical shift where all the women are like, yay, the right to vote. Yay, I'm going to go run around and, participate in premarital sex and cut my hair off short and become a flapper. Yay, let me smoke and drink in public. That's not exactly how it happens. Are there a larger portion of American women that begin to do that? Yes, but they're predominantly young women, teenagers, and women in their early 20s. Once women married, they were expected to settle down and to fulfill that traditional home or role is in the home as a wife and a homemaker, all right? So, yes, there's a change, but yet that traditional role for women still exists in the United States, all right? So it's not like it's that large of a change in that, all right? As more Americans move to the United States, they are predominantly, during the 1920s, moving into the cities. We talked about urbanization, and the reality of it is that we see by the 1930s, 56% of the American population will live in an urban environment, okay? It is a dramatic shift from the 1800s, when only 5% of the American population will live in an urban environment. Okay? So we are seeing a huge shift on that. But as a direct